All right. What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? How is it going? I am Is There No One Else? And the video I'm bringing you today, we are going to talk about Templars. We're going to talk about Magicka and Stamina Templars. Now, I know some of you guys clicked on this video and you were hoping I was just going to roast this class and burn it into the ground like a few other content creators have, and I'm not here to do that. I know a few of you have clicked this hoping that I'm going to say like everything's fine and everything's perfectly balanced, and I'm not going to do that either. I'm going to try to meet on the middle ground here. We're going to talk about the class. We're going to talk about where it's been. We're going to talk about where it is in Scalebreaker and my thoughts on what I think the adjustments need to be for PvP. Now, as always, guys, these are just my thoughts. It's my thoughts of playing the class and playing against it in PvP, typically small scale, in a solo, outnumbered, or a small group environment. But the reason I like to talk about, when I talk about classes like this, guys, I'm not talking about this as like a Stamina Nightblade, that's getting shit on by Magplars, and I'm like, oh, fuck that, that's OP. I'm not a guy crying about a class because it's killing me in PvP. I'm a guy that has played against it. I'm a guy that has played it. I've done it from both points of view. So I've played Magplar. I understand its strengths and weaknesses in small and solo play. I played against it, and I understand its hangups on both ends. And so I'm going to try and be as all inclusive as possible with this video. Talk about the hang-up points. Talk about all those sorts of things. So this video may get a little long. I apologize for that. That's just the way it's going to go with this video. Hopefully you guys stay tuned in. So we're going to start with Magplar over the last couple of years. Now, as you guys know, if you've been playing ESO for a while, Magplar has always been like the number one group play class. Like it's always been the pickup starter class. Like if somebody does PvE or they're like, hey, guys, I got done doing all my quests and I got done with the main storyline and I want to hop into PvP, like what class should I hop on? What are you going to recommend to somebody that's brand new to PvP? The best class is Magplar. It just is. Because they're going to take a long time to figure it out. They might not have, heals leveled up, for the stamina classes. They might not have vigor yet. And so you can just say, hey, hop on a Magplar, join a group. You can hold left trigger, and you can hit Honor the Dead or Breath of Life, and you will support your group, and you will stay alive long enough to where you can figure some shit out, And so then you can go offensive, and you can do some damage, and you can just stay alive. And so Magplar in a group play scenario has always been super effective. Like me and my buddies have had Magplar night where like we just get 3, 4, 5 Magplars together, and it's pretty nasty, because we just have so much support healing going out. We have AoE spammables, and it's tough to deal with in groups. And so it's always been that way. And it's always been the strength of the class. That's what the healer class should do. The healer class should amplify your group by providing a lot of support via purifies, via heals, and then they've also built in a pretty good amount of tankiness into the class. Offensively, their toolkit has gone through a lot of revamps. This time last year, guys, I don't know if you guys remember this if you played Magplar. Magplar or Stamplar last year were brutal. Absolutely brutal to play with because the animation on sweeps would disappear. And so your character would get caught in this animation and you would think you would just be standing there and you would try to spam your jabs or your sweeps and you'd be stuck in this channel and you try to backbar, but because it's a channel, you can't backbar until it's done and you don't see the damage you're doing. And so a lot of people were having a hard time offensively on a Magplar and Stamplar this time last year because of these bugs. Sweeps and jabs have also notoriously been basically hit or miss. Like the hitbox for sweeps and jabs has been poor. And so even though like their damage is pretty solid, it was sometimes hard to line up burst with your sweeps and jabs on people over the years. And so they've done some adjustments for that to allow people to land this. And so although Magplar is a very good group play class, solo-wise, it's always been a little rough. And the reason it is because although they have a decent burst combination, you have to wait for it to line up. And so because you have to wait this amount of time for it to line up, that's a lot of incoming damage from 2, 3, 4, 5 people, and you have to go on the defensive. And so sometimes it's really hard to just line up a burst and take somebody out. And so that's the problem. Yeah, that's always been the problem with Magplar. Now, they've had 2 great improvements to their class. Number 1 is the Psijic skill line. The Psijic skill line providing race against time for everybody so that you have a mobilization and snare immunity and you don't have to be a vampire is fantastic. It now has given Magplars the ability to be mobile while also being able to go on the offensive, because you can't go on the offensive in Mistform. Mistform was the previous only way to be mobile. And so you can't be super fast in Mistform and then come out and go on the offensive. Now, if you see this, I have a lot of mobility now. Now I can come in, I can hit my combos, and I can do all that. So this has been a great change for a lot of Magicka classes that have lacked that mobility. The other amazing change that they have done, and a lot of people have bitched about this, is Toppling Charge. The changes that they made to Toppling Charge, it being able to not have a minimum distance, allows you to stay on top of targets and finish them. And so if you're fighting a dodge rolling Stamblade, for instance, and they get a big burst off on you and you hit them with a couple dots and they go retreating, you can now close in and hit with your sweeps, and you could potentially finish off and get the kill. I've been playing a lot of medium armor stamina necromancer lately. I have had Magplars be able to keep up with my medium armor bow and 2H stamina necromancer via Toppling Charge. Now, I don't think that's a bad thing. I know a lot of people don't like the skill. It's a gap closer. You can block it. It doesn't go through block. So if you see somebody gap close on you, you block, you absorb the damage, and then you dodge roll and you try and either break line of sight, or you CC them, or you do something else. So I think the skill's fine. I think the skill amplifies everything else in their toolkit to make their offensive toolkit really good now. Like it's in a very solid spot. And so, you have your burst combo, and now you can go in with Toppling Charge, you can hit with your Crescent, you can hit with a couple sets of sweeps, and now it's just the class doesn't feel clunky and shitty and terrible. And so these have been amazing changes. Really, really good changes overall for the health of the burst in the class. Now, the problem with that is when they made these 2 changes, the other changes that they already had for the class to try and give them the ability to hit things, it's now become a little bit overloaded. And so when we go in here, and this is going to be the negative part about Magplars, if we look at our puncturing sweeps, each strike reduces the movement speed of the closest enemy by 40% for 1 second. So anybody that we hit for 1 second that's closest to us is going to be snared with this. Toppling Charge is our CC. Our Reflective Light also snares by 40%. If we go on our back bar and we look at our Sacred Ground passives, while standing in your Cleansing Ritual, Rune Focus, or Rited passive, so if they stand in this, they're also snared by, 30%. If they stand in our Purify, which is this huge ass fucking circle, they're also snared by 30%. And so when we go through a hypothetical, guys, let's say we have a 5v5. It's a fair fight between 2 evenly matched numbered groups. Let's just say it's BGs. Let's say it's 4v4, right? One of the groups has a Magplar. Well, you're going to try and fight their group. The Magplar knows that typically, hey, I'm a fucking Magplar. They're going to try and focus me first because I'm the support class. They're going to want to take me out because if they focus anybody else, I'm just going to keep them healed to full. And so you have to come into me and fight me in my snared battleground. And so if I go defensive and you jump in here, you're snared and you can't move. If I go offensive, you're snared and you can't move. On top of that, they've also introduced, the skill that we all know and love, which is Living Dark, which heals you, and it also snares you. And so all these are different snares, and they all can stack. And so the most annoying thing about fighting a Magplar is you literally cannot move. And so when we talk about Magplars, and we talk about, their audits, they made a strong case about a bunch of different skills having certain things. So like what they've said with Flying Blade. Flying Blade is now a utility skill. It's a gap closer, and it gives you major brutality, and so it's not going to do as much damage because of the utility skill. Heroic Slash, when it had its snare and it giving you minor heroism, should not do as much damage because it's a utility skill. And so they've gone through all these things. Purify is a utility skill. This heals everybody in this area. It removes 5 dots from you. You can activate a synergy on it, and on top of that, it snares. It's one of the best utility skills in the game. Now, I don't think they should go after the Purify, removing 5 harmful effects from a Templar. I don't think they should. I don't even think they need to go after the heal. I think they need to get rid of the snare. Like, this specific morph providing a snare is ridiculous. Now, if you're going to run the other one that does damage, I think that makes sense. I think if you want to purify less dots and you want to have crowd control, you should have the ability to. I think that's, in my head, that makes sense. But the one that removes 5 negative effects and also snares people in this big of an area just doesn't make any sense to me. This providing a snare also doesn't make any sense to me. And when we talk about, our bubble, I also just do not think this should provide a snare. Now, this has been talked about previously, like last year and the year before this new combat team came into place. There were a lot of players on YouTube and streamers that talked about all the snares in the game. And, in my opinion, I think it was Fangarush. I think Fangarush said it best, where he basically said, nobody enjoys not being able to move. At one point they had a huge problem with high movement speed where people literally couldn't gap close on top of people because the movement speed was too high. So they're like, you know what? We're going to get rid of that movement speed, and then we're going to snare everybody to shit with a bunch of different skills. And so they've slowly removed all the snares, not all the snares, but the snares from a lot of skills. They've removed it from Flying Blade. They removed it from Fear. They removed it from, I think Reverberating Bash had a snare, if I remember correctly. Every single weapon skill line had a snare built into one of a very useful skill. And so they slowly started removing those. And I think they need to go further. And so if this is going to heal you, it shouldn't also snare you just because you're attacking them. And so once again, guys, when we're talking about fighting a Magplar in a 4v4 battle, you have to focus the Magplar first, like 9 times out of 10. If they're a decent Magplar and they have access to this very high tooltip burst heal, you're going to have to focus them down, or else they're just going to keep other people alive. And so Magplar is automatically focused. Now, they have built-in tankiness. I'm in light armor here, and with Bloodspawn fully procced, I'm going to be at almost capped resistances. I'm wearing Swift, as you guys can see. 10% damage mitigation, I have Bloodspawn. I can be very, very tanky with this build. And if I take damage, if I CC break, I can heal back to full. As a Magplar, I have never needed an ability that stops people from being able to attack me. I've never needed this. I think this idea is cool in that it can heal you, but they talk about the need for a CC or whatever, but Templars already have Toppling Charge. They already have Piercing Javelin. They already have CCs. They already have this ability to, kind of, just prevent people, make people stay in place. And so I don't think this snare needs to exist either. And so when you look at the toolkit for a Magplar, now, as I said, that's where they're at right now in Scalebreaker. Everything is snares. And this is the most frustrating part about fighting a Magplar or a group with a Magplar or 2 in it. If you get 2 Magplars in a group, there's nowhere you can go when you're trying to fight them, in melee range, to where you're not going to be snared. And I'm sure a lot of you guys that do BGs, you experience the same thing. You run across those Magplar, Stamplar groups, and nobody can move. And you're trying to play medium, and you're trying to play kitey, and their entire toolkit is snaring you in place. They're not building into it. If I want to snare as a, mag DK, I have to run Talons. And Talons does a nice little dot, and it also locks people in place and then they can break it. If I want to run Ash Cloud, it's super expensive. It's a small radius and it also snares. And so it provides this big thing. And I'm pretty sure Ash Cloud it's about the same size as this rune, or maybe it's a little bit smaller. But it's expensive. And so if I want to try to use that to snare you in place, I have to expend a lot. I don't have to expend a lot to do close to the same thing with this, And so I don't think this skill with the utility that it provides makes any sense. And so with the mobility that you can now have on a Magplar, with the range that you have with sweeps, anybody being able to snare people in place allows you to stay on top of them. But you already can now with toppling charge. And so for a while, these snares were somewhat needed. I would say that some of these snares were actually very useful for fighting at one point in time on a Magplar. They're not needed anymore. Magplar's actually in a pretty good spot as far as like their gap closer and how their hit points for puncturing, or the hit boxes for puncturing sweeps are working. Crescent sweep has been a great change as well. Like all these things are good. So get rid of the snares, and I think Magplar would be in a much better spot. Now, the final thing that I want to talk about, guys, is Boom Baby. We might as well just say it. Purifying light and power of the light. It got changes in 2 different directions, and it's going to need to be tested. Yeah, I'm just going to say that right now. I'm just looking at it on paper. I haven't actually tested this, so I don't want to provide too big of an opinion. But when you read when you've PvP'd in Scalebreaker, and this is me talking, I guess, to the developers at this point. When you've PvP'd in Scalebreaker, and you see so many people changing to Magplar and Stamplar because they have access to a very powerful Purify, and Purify is just the strongest thing right now because dots are insane. Once you tone dots back down, a lot more people will be hopping off Magplars and Stamplars because they won't need extended ritual to survive. They'll be able to survive through healing and other things, and so that one change will bring Stamplars and Magplars back to Earth, as far as like how powerful they are. The other thing that they've done is, in the first week, they made this be able to crit. And that was the first change of the patch notes. This stores all this damage, and now it can crit. And when you look at, I'm speaking for the community here, when you're taking as much dot damage as you are in Scalebreaker, and it's like, hey, by the way, all this dot damage can now store up, and literally half the people you're fighting are Templars, are Stamplars, or Magplars, and they're hitting you with Power of the Light or Purifying Light. That damage can now crit. You're just sitting here and you're like, holy fuck, why? Why is this a thing? I'm personally of the belief that, and this is just my opinion, guys, I think all abilities, I think all proc sets, everything in this game should be able to crit. I think if you're going to have crit chance, everything should have crit chance because it opens up, the ability to use something like Mother Sorrow or, a high crit, Shadow Mundus and all this sort of things. I think that's useful. However, if dots are super high and you could take a bunch of incoming damage and then that damage can crit, you're making an already problematic situation even worse. And so I think this is going to have to be looked at. I think I'm going to have to, duel a bunch of people and see exactly what Purifying Light and Power of the Light is doing on the PTS because, it very well could be one of those things where you need to tone back how much damage at base Purifying and Power of the Light does so that when it does crit, it's not critting for like 15k or 20k or something retarded and just like melting people's health bars because that's, you should be able to burst, with the Templar and a Stamplar, but you shouldn't have just, access to some of the best heals in the game, and then also have access to some of the best tankiness in the game, while also having access to some of the best burst in the game. Like that just doesn't make any sense because right now, Magplar's toolkit and Stamplar's toolkit is very, very powerful. It's very strong, and so on paper, I feel like this may need to be adjusted. But keep in mind, guys, this last week they also took away this ability to be copied by everybody. So if I'm in a 3-man and I say, hey, focus the guy with the beam on him, my other buddies cannot build up the damage for this. It only can be my damage. And so that is a fantastic change. That's one of the biggest problems, honestly, fighting Templars in PvP outnumbered is because everybody, a healer can put this on you and it's free damage. And everybody beating on you is now taking in that stored damage. And so I think that change is great, and I actually like both changes. I like it being able to crit. I like that it's only that person doing the damage. So those 2 changes are fantastic. We'll just have to see exactly what Purifying and Power of the Light will do. And for those of you guys that have been on the PTS and they have been testing, please please provide your honest opinion on how you feel about Purifying Light and Power of the Light, and where it's at, because I'm curious where that is. But in summation, guys, that's going to be the end of this video. I do think Magplars are overtuned a little bit, and it's typically just the snares. The dot meta, they are going to be the strongest class. We talked about it before Scale Breaker dropped. Like, hey, Templars, Stamplars, and Magplars are going to be the best suited for a high dot meta because they can just remove the dots. And healing through dots isn't as powerful as just removing them. And so we now see it. We now see the best support class also become one of the best damage dealing classes due to the high dots and what Purifying Light and Power of the Light does with stacking with a bunch of incoming damage. And so now you see a bunch of people hopping on this class. Once the dots drop down a little bit, you will see less people on Templars because they just will not need that to survive. You'll see them on other classes, and you'll see other classes kind of, creep up into that power range. But the crowd control that they provide is too easy to have access to. Like I said, if I'm a warden, I have to build into my crowd control by running support skills that snare you in place. If I'm a DK, I have to do the same thing and expend a shit ton of magicka in order to do the same thing that a Templar just does naturally with every single thing that they do. Like everything that we do, snare, oh, you're going to stand to me, that's a snare. Oh, you're going to attack me. Oh, now you're snared again. Like everything here is snares. And so those are the changes that I would like to see with Magplar. I think, I want them to have their burst combinations. I want them to be able to have their survivability through Honor the Dead and Breath of Life. I want them to be able to have their Purify. I want them to keep their class identity as the group healer. It's a pain in the ass. As a solo player fighting a bunch of Magplars, it's a pain in the ass. But it can be a lot less of a pain in the ass if you don't provide these mechanics that just stop you from being able to move and do things that you naturally should be able to do. And so that's the changes that I want to see. If you guys agree with me, as always, I'm not saying I'm right. This is just my experience from playing the class and playing against it. These are just my thoughts. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to, have a discussion on this, and you guys tell me what you think. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe you guys want to talk about, how does Crescent Sweep still keep its animation cancel when, Onslaught and Dawnbreaker and Incap all have cast times? Why didn't that get looked at? Why aren't we doing the same audit for ultimates that are easily cast and have high burst as other ultimates? And so I know people are going to say, oh, this doesn't hit as hard as some of those other ultimates. Well, unbuffed, it's 8642 magic damage, so it's like 9,500. Enemies in your path will be hit for 60% more. So this hits for about 14,000. And then it also does, 12,000 damage over 6 seconds. So this it hits just as hard as anything else. And it can also proc Burning Light. And so when you compare this to other skills like Dawnbreaker and Onslaught is stronger than both of them. So that needs still more of an adjustment in my opinion, but that's for a different video. There's no real difference between the damage that this provides and the damage that Inconveniencing Strike provides or Dawnbreaker. And when you look at the cost of it being so cheap, why doesn't it have, the same restrictions of other ultimates? If it's okay for Magplars to have animation cast it, being able to animation cancel ultimates, why can't Nightblades? Why can't other classes that want to use Dawnbreaker? So I'm going to leave the video here. I mostly just want to talk about Magplars. Hopefully this is, fun to watch. Thank you for watching, guys. Have a nice day.